Austin. And as of next Sunday, I'll be live streaming on Austin. And as of next Sunday, I'll be live streaming whatever this stomach thing has been afflicting me with. But whatever this stomach thing has been afflicting me with. But I think we're getting clear. People are starting to kind of meander into the experience, which is great. I'll say a little hello here on the old chatteroo. Here we go. Hey, there's Madeline. Hi, Judy. Nice to see everybody. So South by Southwest is happening in Austin. Hi, Suzanne. Suzanne Potter Thomas. Hi, Brian. Hello, Sandra. Great. I think we'll just kind of like hang out for a little bit until people start to accumulate. By the way, if you want to play at home tonight, you can go to astro.com, and I have found 4 charts, which I think are pretty interesting, and they're all grabbable. There are 2 charts from, one chart from today. So if you look at the homepage for astro.com, you'll see the right-hand side down at the bottom, they'll have birthdays. There are 2 from today that I'm pulling, which is the chart of Jack Kerouac and Ron Jeremy. And then yesterday, which is March 11th. And all you have to do to get to March 11th, well, today is March 11th. So it's tomorrow, the 12th. That's going to be Jack Kerouac and Ron Jeremy. And then the 11th, which for most of you will be today, that's Nina Hartley and Johnny Knoxville. So, hi, Daniel. So those are the charts we'll be looking at tonight. And we'll kind of be doing some stuff around just the chart of the moment and talking about the end of the astrological new year, which is where we are tonight. And I've had a really interesting week in terms of like doing readings for people. It was a pretty powerful week. I've been experimenting with some different stuff and actually getting out of my house to do readings outside. And what I mean by that is not doing readings with people one-on-one, but actually, being closer outdoors and sitting down at my computer and doing readings both live and recorded into the computer. It's a very different kind of environment when you are outside of an office. It's an interesting change. The other thing too is it's been a great week in terms of just looking at the charts and but really understanding the cyclical and seasonal nature of astrology, which we're going to get into tonight. And for some of you, it can be really basic. And I apologize if I'm going over things that you already know. But for other people who are just kind of tuning into astrology, it's a really important part of astrology that a lot of people seem to not really pay attention to or are unaware of. So we're going to talk about the seasonal and the cyclical aspects of astrology. And it's been a really fascinating time in terms of like getting people, like I've been reading for a lot of Sagittarians lately. It's been an interesting, because I don't normally get a lot of Sagittarians. And I'm wondering if I'm getting Sagittarians because they've had Saturn over the last year, going across, thanks, Daniel, going across their Sun and Mercury, Moon, Venus, generally Sun, Mercury, Venus, or whether Saturn's gone across their ascendant. But I've found a lot of Sagittarians reaching out, wanting to have their charts read. And it's usually a pretty independent sign in a lot of ways. Like they have their own personal philosophy. And I guess it was about 2 weeks ago, I had three people, and they were all Sagittarian, and they were all born about a week apart from each other in the same year. And I thought, wow, this is really a trip. 1966, December 1966. And the interesting thing about all three of those people is that they had a Saturn Chiron conjunction in their chart, which is uncommon. You don't see a lot of Saturn Chiron conjunctions. So that was interesting. And sometimes when you get into reading for people and you have clients, you'll see that there are synchronicities that will show up. I had two people back to back, like one day and then the next day, and they basically had the same chart, although they were separated by, I don't know, maybe about a week. And this was not the Sagittarian group. These are two people that were Aquarians, and they both had Sun Chiron conjunction. Really interesting. And both of them have had histories of addiction. And I thought, wow, this is so fascinating. It's just like almost the same chart. And they both have grand crosses in their chart. And so, I'm floored. I'm absolutely floored sometimes by the intelligence of the universe, of the multiverse, to line these things up. It was like, it's like surfing in sets of waves. It's really fascinating stuff. So I think we're going to be at around 1920. When I move next week, it'll be more consistent on Sunday nights, which I'm looking forward to, especially at this 8:00 time. There's going to come a time in about 3 or 4 weeks where it's going to be light out. That'll be interesting. I'll be doing a daytime broadcast at 8:00 at night. Okay, so why don't we get going? And I think what we'll do tonight is we'll do kind of what we normally do. I'll go through the chart of the moment, which you can find. Susan Potter Thomas says, it's light here. So that's a little bit west of me. Yeah, I guess there's light everywhere sometime on the planet, right? Isn't that kind of heartwarming that somewhere out there there's light? Even in the darkest California, even in the darkest hours, there's light. So why don't we do this? Let's get into the chart of the moment. And then what we can do is, again, the charts for tonight, if you want to go to astrodeans.com, you can go there right now and you'll be able to get on the right-hand side, there's a list of people, it's their birthdays. So tonight's people are Johnny Knoxville, Nina Hartley, and if you go to tomorrow, which would be March 12th, and then the charts that we're going to pull off of there are Ron Jeremy and Jack Kerouac. So we'll play with those charts tonight. And since I don't have a way to actually post them, hey, there's Joe. What's going on, Joe? Since I don't have a way to actually post the charts, that's pretty good direction. We're going to get into the chart of the moment, and we're going to talk about what it's like here at the end of the astrological new year, because, of course, we're looking at the rebirth of the astrological new year in March, and it's right around March 21st. That's when the energy really kicks in and hits. So let me get into let me go over here and let me pull up the chart of the moment. And then we're going to look at the spring equinox. Okay, there we go. All right. So the chart of the moment right now is, Libra 1. And we've got all those planets assembling in the 6th and 7th house. Neptune, Sun. The Sun is past Neptune. It's coming up on Chiron. So we're going to have a Sun-Chiron conjunction in about 6 days. So what's that going to put it right around March 17th? We've got the Ides of March coming up. We'll look at some of the planets for the Ides of March. That'll be the 15th. And that Sun-Chiron conjunction, that's an interesting conjunction because, we've been dealing with a lot of Chiron and Pisces energy, and it's right there at the end. It's 27, 28 degrees. And, my mantra is when a planet, in this case, a planetoid, gets to the end of its sign that it's been in this case, Pisces, and those last 2 degrees are the degrees that get how shall we say, wonky. The energy gets wonky. If you go back in time and you look at where the planets were on, wow, this day, 3/11. How about that? 3/11/11. That's when the Fukushima experience hit. And, you know, it was such a Piscean event in a lot of ways, because to this day, there are people that don't agree upon sort of the ultimate mechanism of Fukushima. There are some people that believe that it was an actual bomb that was set off right at the continent, right at the Pacific shelf there, just off the coast of Japan. And I tend to think that that probably might be the case, that the tsunami and the attendant earthquakes were actually triggered. Now, I was listening. Who was I listening to today? I was listening to one of these truth people. They come so quickly, happen so fast and furious. I forget who some of them are. I know who most of them are, but I'd never heard this guy before. Anyway, he was basically saying that Fukushima was done by the Bush family. I'm like, yeah, maybe. Bush family have done a few other dastardly things, more than a few, so why not have their fingerprints on Fukushima? But what I'm trying to get at here is that, number one, it started off in the ocean. So automatically, that's a Piscean event. You know, we have, of course, the tsunami comes in, and the images of Fukushima, man, they blew my mind. And I was up late at night watching that whole thing transpire. And I thought to myself, this is going to be intense. Like the fallout, the literal fallout from this is going to be intense. And it was. I think it was about 10 days later that there was a storm that hit Northern California that I had never seen before, had never experienced before. It was the intensity and the fury, and there was just something about this storm. It was about 10 days after Fukushima happened. And I know for a fact that whatever happened at Fukushima with the Daiichi nuclear plant, whatever was coming out of that plant was rising up above into the upper atmosphere. It was carried over into California very quickly. And I've got a pretty good sixth sense about this stuff. Anyway, so it's a Piscean event. It happened on the ocean, in the ocean. And then if you're looking for some other indicators, both Uranus and Neptune were at their final degrees. So Neptune at that point in time was in Aquarius, and Uranus was in, Neptune was in Aquarius and Uranus was in Pisces. So this was a major shift. I think one was at 29 and the other was at 28. So when we get to those final degrees, the energy gets erratic, let's say the least. Okay, erratic to say the least. So what we have now is we have Chiron at 27 Pisces, and I believe Uranus was at 28 Pisces when Fukushima hit. So Chiron's off of that Fukushima event by 1 degree. If I'm not mistaken, I'll go back in time and look at it. So also what we've seen, though, with the advent of Chiron and Pisces, and I talked about this with Heather Eland. And by the way, I've got a webinar coming up on the 24th of March, and that's going to be on Chiron and Aries. And if you haven't seen the Q&A with Heather and I thought it was really good. Heather asked some great questions, and we have a really good chemistry. Heather was a student of mine. She studied with me, and she basically turned her study into a career in astrology, and she's now a self-sufficient practicing astrologer. She's really good. So we have a history, we have a cadence, and doing the interviews with her is pretty easy because of, sort of the mind meld that we've had together. Anyway, you could go over to astrological.com if you are so inclined and sign up for the webinar. The last one on Saturn and Capricorn was a huge success. And a lot of people really got into it. And I was on there for about 3.5 hours. You can still get that webinar, by the way, from Astrological. That's still available. So if you're into it, and I think there's a discount before you sign up by a certain day. I don't know if that day is come and gone yet. So we have Chiron coming into Aries, but what we talked about on that interview was we talked about the celebration of the victim. And boy, did I catch some heat for this. Did I catch some heat? Because one of the things that we've seen with Pisces, it's not just, anything, anything new. It's like it's nothing new under the sun. I mean, when we look at Pisces, what do we see? We see vilification and scorn and scapegoating. Jesus is a perfect example of the scapegoat, the birth of the Piscean age taking place at that time. So we become very well informed about the nature of the scapegoat, and especially as it relates to Pisces. And if you have any friends or relatives or close associations that are Pisces, how many times have you heard a Pisces person feel as though they're being victimized, or feel as though that they're the victim of some kind of level of either retribution or unfairness? I've seen it quite a bit. In fact, I have a very close relative who happens to be 14 years old last week, and he's actually getting better at this. But I've seen him, actually play that role a little bit. And the weird thing about it is sometimes I've seen this with Pisces. They don't even have to do anything. Sometimes the role of the scapegoat just sticks to them like Velcro. It's fascinating to watch. Absolutely fascinating. And it feels like in some ways it's almost like a spiritual, not a badge per se, but a spiritual mission that they play out in this lifetime. Now that's going to change as we move into Aquarius. That's going to change as we move into Pluto and Aquarius, and theoretically the age of Aquarius. That will change. Now, why will it change? Well, it'll change because one of two things will happen, right? Either we will have a complete level playing field and one system that unites all, whatever that system is. So therefore, there can be no scapegoats, because a scapegoat, in my estimation, has to be an individual. It has to be an individual. It has to be targeted. But if everybody is part of one system, one collective, one mind, then if that person is the scapegoat, then everybody's the scapegoat, theoretically, right? Am I right? Am I right? That's what I think. So if we move into the age of Aquarius, the whole notion of the scapegoat theoretically can go away. Now, there's another version of that, and this is the one that I actually prefer, because in the age of Aquarius, if we are all completely responsible for our thoughts, if we're all completely responsible for our feelings, if we're all completely responsible for our growth, if we're all completely responsible for our self-governance, we can't be responsible for completely everything, because we have to be, to some degree, dependent upon other people, to some degree, right? Like if you want to buy something and you have money, you have to be you have to have an agreement with another person to be able to fulfill their end of the bargain with that transaction, and that's fine. It's a series of transactions, and to that extent, we need other people. And I don't want to make it so cut and dry and base that human interactivity is just a series of transactions, because that's kind of too economical, in my opinion. But we do need other people. But in this model of the age of Aquarius, we're responsible for our stuff, and we're not going to pin it on anybody else. Like if you run out of gas, who's responsible for not putting the gas in the truck or the car? Am I right? If you don't pay a bill on time and your electricity gets cut off, who's responsible? I mean, stuff like that. So in that world, there are no scapegoats. In that version of the age of Aquarius, there are no scapegoats. because they're because everybody's responsible for their own shit, right? The other version, there are no scapegoats because everybody theoretically is the same. So if there's one scapegoat, then the entire system is taking part of the hit for it. So theoretically, we should be coming to the end of the age of scapegoatism. And maybe by the time Neptune actually moves into Aries, and I can't even begin to think what Neptune and Aries is going to be like, man, that'll be intense. Because that's a weird energy, right? I mean, Neptune, a water sign, water planet, Aries, a fire sign. I got to sit with Neptune and Aries for a little bit. I think this is it with Neptune and Pisces. I think we have I think this is the challenge with Neptune and Pisces. I think it's kind of make or break in a lot of ways on a spiritual level. That's what I think. That's what I feel. I feel like once we get to Neptune and Aries, whatever is kind of locked in at that point is kind of locked in. That's my sense for another 17 years or 15 years. And then we go into Neptune and Taurus. Shit, I doubt if I'll even be around then. So we got Neptune is not even halfway through Pisces. It's at 14 degrees. But we've been living in the era where victimization has been celebrated. Victimization has become the cause celeb. And victimization has almost taken on a role of its own, a spiritual role of its own. There's a book by Thomas A. Kempis. It's a very old book. It's called The Imitation of Christ. And it's one of these kind of, middle period medieval works where he's going through all these kinds of spiritual castigations and spiritual punishment so that he can somehow arrive at a relative level of suffering that Jesus had, and he could relate to him at that point. So this is a slightly Thomas A. Kempis, slightly famous book, Imitation of Christ. And what I shared with Heather on that recording that we did on YouTube is that what we've seen with Chiron and Pisces is a generation or a planet of Christ imitators through suffering, through pain, through wounding, through victimization, but it's a secularized version of it. So it's a secularized imitation of Christ. And this is what Chiron and Pisces has brought us. And theoretically, what Chiron and Pisces could have and should have done, and we'll get another kind of brief go around with it because it only goes into Aries for 2 degrees and it's back again. It's like, it's back. You thought your suffering was over. You thought you were through with all these victims. No, you're not. Yes, again, we're back with more victimization 24/7 just for you. Don't you feel bad for us? You see, that's what's been going on with this Chiron and Pisces, and things like comfort zones and cuddle zones and puppies on campuses and hot chocolate and all the attendant things that are there to somehow comfort us in our darkest hours when we feel that the world is really collapsing in on us. And that was really what the scenario was like. After the election, well, we're still here. We haven't gone to nuclear war, have we? The economy is doing relatively okay. Washington itself is hyperkinetic, and Uranus conjunct the sun in Gemini, hyperkinetic. But we're all still here. All the terrible and unfounded fears of people that were so up in arms of the election of Donald Trump. Well, what's happened? I mean, we're coming up on the November midterms. It'll be 2 years, and we're all still here. It's really funny. I was at my water hole the other night, Jack Allen's, and I'd fallen asleep. I woke up. I was hungry. I went to get a salad, and I sat down at the bar, I'd been watching these videos that G. Edgar Griffin had put together. You know, the guy who did The Creature from Jekyll Island. He's an interesting character. I don't know much about his background. He still has a website. It's a pretty good source of information. But there are about 6 videos that he's cobbled together. I think he had a show or something back in the 80s where he was breaking down. He was getting these videos and he was trying to essentially warn people about the evils of communism. It's very interesting stuff in a lot of ways. Pretty interesting stuff. Excuse me. Anyway, I've been watching these videos, and I went into my local bar, restaurant, Jack Allen's, and I mentioned something about the videos and then something about communism. And this woman sitting next to me said, "Oh, it'd be a lot better than this." You know, and I sat there and I thought to myself, well, better than what? Better than what? I mean, can somebody please tell me, like, other than the fact that we're at war and we're basically going through a purple revolution, in that we're really at war, ideological war. We're at spiritual war. But other than that, I mean, things continue to go on as they seem and have been, and it's like, well, has anybody done anything terrible to you, right? Have you been assaulted in the streets? Has somebody taken your? I mean, yeah, I just wonder why would communism be so much better? She was sitting there. She had a nice drink. She had a nice dinner. Her dinner looked great. Seemed like life was okay to me, you know. And I didn't say anything. Because that person's enjoying their dinner. I don't want to get into some kind of ideological debate about that. But if you really stare down what communism is and does, my God, she would be shocked. Absolutely shocked. Anyway, if you have a stomach for it and you don't think it's some kind of right-wing propaganda, go look at these videos. And the one that'll absolutely blow your mind is about a province in the Congo called Katanga. And there was a revolution that took place with Patrice Lumumba back in 1961. It happened 6 months roughly after John F. Kennedy had been elected president. So if you're going to get down and have some revolutionary stuff happening, you want it to happen when a new president just goes right into office, right? And that's exactly what happened. And you got to watch this video because it shows how the game works. It's a really early version of regime change and all the propaganda that goes into it. The only difference is that I think right now the United States is playing the role of what Russia used to play in these regime changes. Fascinating stuff. Anyway, here we are, Chiron and Aries, late degrees. We're still going to go through that march on Washington on the 24th. March. That'll be at the high. Let's check that out. Let's see what that day looks like. Let me go over here. Let me get into the ephemeris. Sorry, I'd be more prepared tonight. I've been kind of in the moving zone today. So let's get into this. All right, so we're looking at the March. The March in March. Excuse me, led by the Star of David, David Hogg. Okay, here we go. That's a Saturday. Of course, the moon looks like it's going to be, if they go early in the day, it'll be in Gemini. I think the moon will be in Gemini early in the morning on Saturday. So, of course, the moon's in Gemini, polarization. We have Mercury retrograde in Aries at 16 degrees. You know, one of the things that I've had some concern about with this event, of course, the sun will be in Aries at 3 degrees. And the spring equinox, the spring solstice is going to be on the 21st. I'm sorry, the spring equinox. My bad. So the spring equinox is going to be on the 21st. Remember that. We'll look at that day too. So just 3 days later, on the 24th, they're going to be springing literally off of that energy And Mercury goes retrograde the day before, the 23rd. So one of my fears is that something will not go well on this day. That maybe they have some yahoos show up at this event. You know, maybe they bus in some yahoos like they did down in Charlottesville. So we have, let's see, Venus is in Aries. So we have Venus Aries at 21. So now we've got a stellium in Aries. And we have a Mars-Sun square. Mars-Sun square. Mars will be in Capricorn at 3 degrees, and the Sun will be in Aries at 3 degrees. You know what that is? That's violence. That's total violence. I've got a Mars-Sun square in my chart. I grew up with Mars-Sun square. Let's just say I had at times a very martial relationship with my father, especially early on. I know what Mars-Sun is like. This could be a very volatile event with this Mars-Sun square. I'd stay away from Washington. If you've got kids, you plan on taking them there, I'd think twice about that. Let's see, what else do we have? Jupiter is in Scorpio, retrograde. What's it doing? Saturn's in the mix too. Saturn's at 8 degrees. It doesn't go retrograde yet. It's close. Doesn't go retrograde until April. Let me just see here. Saturn goes retrograde on the 18th of April at 9 degrees. Mars-Saturn conjunction. It's at 5 degrees. That's a conjunction that is fairly stable. 5 degrees, 5-degree orb. You can kind of roll with that. Saturn in Capricorn is highly organized. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens here. I don't know. I don't like the Sun square Mars though. Don't these people understand astrology when they plan these events? Probably. Let's see, what do we have here? Uranus is at 27 degrees. And let's see, where are we? On the 24th. Okay. There's Neptune at 14 Pisces. And then Pluto at 21 Capricorn. So Mercury, Pluto square. Mercury in Aries, Pluto. I think there's going to be really, really high tempers at this event. I don't get a good feeling about this event, this March on March. Mercury retrograde, Mercury Pluto square, and then we have the Sun Mars square, Mars Saturn conjunction. I'm not crazy about this energy. True Node is at 13, Leo. And then Chiron is at 28. So Chiron's at that really critical degree of 28 degrees. And then we have Black Moon Lilith at 15. The Dark Mothers of Saturn. Would that be a good name for a band, the Dark Mothers of Saturn? I'd pay attention to that band. Okay, so we have Chiron at 28. There we go. And it goes to 29 on the 31st. So it's really at that final degree. Let's look at some Sabian symbols here. The Sabian symbols for the final degrees of Aries, Pisces, are really interesting. Let's get into it. So just to be clear, Chiron will be, well, it actually goes to 29 because it's at 28:36. But we'll look at 28. Excuse me. We'll look at 28 and then we'll look at 29. So let's start with 28 Pisces. I'll come back. Okay, 28 Pisces. Now we're going to go back one more. Here we go. 28 Pisces. Okay, so 28 Pisces, a fertile garden under the full moon, reveals a variety of full-grown vegetables. I really like this symbol. It's a symbol of abundance. And Rudyard says this represents the full satisfaction of the individual's basic needs. And then the 29th degree, because that's really where Chiron is going to be, 28 to 29. This is one of the more fascinating symbols in astrology, or the zodiac, in the Sabian symbols. Light breaking into many colors through a prism. And by the way, this is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, isn't this Baron Trump's symbol? I think he's 28. I think he's 29 to 30. So I'll read this to you. This is what Rudyard says about Pisces 29. The analytical power of the mind necessary for the formulation of life processes in their many aspects. Cycles of existence begin in unity and end in what I have called multi-unity. At the stage of consummation, the many individual differences are totaled. They constitute a sum. Within that sum, a unified whole. The inevitability of the future processes of differentiation is implied, because every cycle leaves a mass of waste products, slowly returning to the unconscious state of chemical matter, of humus or humus. What the symbol tells us is that unity will always break again into multiplicity. The prism is always there. There is no absolute unity. If anything could be called absolute, it is the relationship between the one and the many. This fourth stage symbol of the concluding fivefold sequence of phases points to the fundamental type of operation in all modes of existence. The most beautiful and seemingly everlasting experience of unity will in time be superseded by the need to tend to a multiplicity of details. Existence implies differentiation. So I guess on a day where people are marching, this would be kind of an interesting symbol to pop up through Chiron, because it does represent a type of unity. And then it also becomes a multi-unity. And then it gets shot through this prism of the event, and then everybody kind of goes back to their lives. So that actually makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways, just from the actual formation of the event. But I'm still not crazy about that Sun-Mars square. Let's check out what 3 Capricorn is, what the symbol is. Let me just make sure what we're looking at here. Mars, 23rd, 24th. So it's at 335, so we should read it for 4. 4 is a group of people outfitting a large canoe at the start of a journey by water. So this is the ability to use natural resources and basic skills in order to achieve a group purpose. Not bad if you're planning a march. That's a good symbol, right? That's a very good symbol. Rudyard says, as this scene was recorded in the original version only in imprecise terms, it seems merely to indicate the start of a journey undertaken by a cohesive group of people who perhaps together have built this large canoe. Thus, we see here a common enterprise, which may be an answer to the need for a change of locality. The social group, more strongly than ever, reveals its homogeneity and common will when it decides to move away from its familiar habitat. The zodiacal sign of Capricorn brings this common will to a focus in concrete actions. It does so in terms of socio-political expediency and under a definite type of executive direction, even though the decisions are arrived at by common consent. As this is the fourth symbol in the 55th fivefold sequence, we find in it a hint of how to do something concrete. The canoe may also have a special technical meaning, as it uses water in order to move. A common feeling response. There we go. Water in order to move. Chiron in Pisces. Neptune in Pisces. The main emphasis is nevertheless on group activity in circumstances implying a need for change. Wow. Wow. That's going to be Mars in Capricorn. So this could be a very powerful event. And look, I'm not the biggest David Hogg fan in the world. And I believe that event down in Parkland, Florida, and you can feel free to leave the chat or whatever. I have no attachment to other people's reactions, but I've spent a lot of time looking at it, and there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered about what took place in Parkland. And when that event actually happened, I believe the midheaven was in Pisces, if I'm not mistaken. Am I right? I'm pretty sure I'm correct there. So we have a lot of Piscean overlays with that event, especially with Chiron close to the midheaven of that event. Anyway, so there seems to be a lot of powerful energy here for this March. But then we've got the Sun square. Let's find out where the Sun is at. Let's look at Aries 4. Let me go to Aries. Let me just look at the day. 24th. It's going to be Aries 3. Aries 3. So the Sabian symbol of Aries 3 is the cameo profile of a man suggesting the shape of his country. Very interesting. The sustaining power of the whole as the individual identifies themselves with its life. This is very interesting. This is about the Atman and the Brahman, the participation in a greater life. So there are some highly charged symbols around this March on the 24th. And it feels to me, with all the Capricornian backing, which went into gear right after the event happened. Of course, we have to really question that in a lot of ways. Like, you remember those little, remember when you were a kid, they had these little capsules? You put the capsules in water, and when the gelatin capsule would melt, there was like this little sponge animal that was stuffed in the gelatin capsule. So it begins to kind of unfurl in the water, and all of a sudden you've got a little sponge giraffe or a little sponge whale or whatever it was. That reminds me of, those things remind me of what happened right on the heels of Parkland, because the machinery for this thing was just like dropping that little caplet in the water, and all of a sudden you had these sponge-oriented events and processes that were just there ready and waiting to go. All right, let's look at the chart of the moment here. Let's get back to it. Were you born on a cosmic convergence? Okay, so the chart of the moment. Let's look at where the moon is, because the moon is a really good indicator on a Sunday night where the energies are going to be come Monday morning. So when you wake up tomorrow, you're waking up into a Capricorn moon. And right now we got a Moon-Pluto conjunction happening. Now, Moon-Pluto conjunction can be very powerful. Really powerful, especially at this very, very tight degree. The moon is at 19 Cancer, Pluto's at 20 Cancer. So we're separated by about 1 degree. And by and large, people that have Moon-Pluto conjunctions in their chart need intense emotional experience. They need to feel things deeply. It's also a very sexual aspect. It's like having Moon in Scorpio, which is a very sexual aspect in the chart, because we have Moon, which is how we feel, and Pluto, the ruler of Scorpio. So people with Moon-Pluto conjunctions, their lives can also be marked by loss, emotional loss, deep, intense loss, profound loss. So here we go. We got a Moon-Pluto conjunction at 20 degrees. That'll be happening shortly by the end of the night. By the time you wake up tomorrow, I think the moon will probably be about 23. So you're going to be starting your week with the moon on the other side of Pluto with that Moon-Pluto conjunction. But the moon, excuse me, with the week, starting off the week with the moon in Capricorn. And we're in the final phases of the moon here before we go into balsamic which is going to be in about, what, 5 days? And then we have that, let's see, 5 days from now. I think it's like a late new moon, if I'm not mistaken. Let me go back into the ephemeris here. So let's see, we're in March, and the Ides of March, where are we? Which is on the Thursday. So we've got the new moon on the 18th. New moon on the 18th. And it's going to be in Capricorn tomorrow through Thursday. And then we go into balsamic on Wednesday, the 14th in Aquarius. That's an interesting phase for balsamic because it would indicate that there is some letting go around this idea of universality and what it means to have some level of universality that as it moves into the new phase in Pisces, it almost feels like there is some type of rebirth. And it's a rebirth away from something that's ideological, because Aquarius can be ideological. Aquarius and Sagittarius can be the two most ideological signs in a lot of ways. You know, when we look at the overthrow of the Russians and the Bolshevik Revolution, which I think, by the way, is probably one of the most single important events in the last 200 years, apart from the revolution that took place in this country, and for different reasons, which I'm not really going to go into deep elaboration with. But it was an event that was stunning in that I believe it was 1% of the population overthrew an entire country. 1% of the population. 1%. Think about that. I don't think that ever happened before in history. I mean, you look at like all these wars that were raging in Europe, basically between like the 17th century, 16th century to the early 20th century, Europe was constantly at war, constantly at war. And some of these wars would last 5, 6, 7 years. The Crimean War lasted, what, about 5 years? Is that right? Something along those lines. World War I lasted a while. I mean, World War I, what, started in, what, 1911, ended in, what, 1916, 1915? So it was, what, 4 or 5 years? I mean, the Bolshevik Revolution took place from March to November 2017. Yeah, there was the groundwork, and there was a lot of chaos that predated what was going on there. Of course, there was that, but it didn't take that long. It took 8 months. 8 months. March 8th, 1917 to November 9th, 1917. That's it. With 1% of the people. You look back in that event, you go, wow, that's pretty intense. Anyway, I'm talking about the collectivity of Aquarius and the balsamic phase that we're in and coming up here with the entrance into the new moon, which is going to be on, oh, that's funny. I'm doing my webinar on the 24th, the same day as the March of the March. Well, that's good because I got some good aspects for that thing. I just realized that. But that new moon is coming. And it's a weird new moon, too. It's a very, very weird new moon. Very strange. Let me just see here. Let me get back into it. Hold on. So it's going to be, that new moon happens on, yeah, it's happening right there on the 17th. 17th. Yeah, interesting. You know, there's something about this. It almost feels to me like there's something going on, that something's up with the internet here on this final phase here with this balsamic moon and the rebirth into Pisces. I'm not sure if it's ultimately a good thing. I'm not sure it's ultimately a good thing. Because what we've been watching with the internet has been mind-blowing, and the purging of websites and channels and content. It's been, a lot of these people have come back now because, like Richie from Boston, you got to hand it to this dude. He went out and hired a lawyer. He hired a lawyer. He lawyered up against YouTube. How about that? And they said, okay, Richie, get your channel back. So this is what happens. You stand up to these people, and guess what? A lot of times they'll back off. Isn't that interesting? I think Fetzer, or no. I think the ever expanding Jerome Corsi, I think he got his channel back. I mean, I think Jerome Corsi is just turning into a giant head. Does he ever get out of his chair? Maybe that's the issue. I feel for the guy. He does not look healthy, by the way. He does not. I remember seeing him on Alex Jones about a year and a half ago. And this guy, he's ballooned up a lot more over the last year. So this is one of the bad things about the internet and, internet warriors, is that you stick around your computer and sit down too much. It's not healthy. Anyway, there's something about this balsamic phase moon with the final degrees in Aquarius coming into Pisces. And we have this every year, right? We always have this balsamic phase with Aquarius. And this isn't anything new, but, we have to look at kind of where we are in the cycle of activity. What's going on with media? What's going on with the ability to exchange information, freely, or if not freely, at the very least in a medium where people can have give and take with their ideas. Well, this balsamic phase coming up is going to be very fascinating. We're starting to really look at this on the 13th, 14th, 15th, right there up through the 16th. So look at these next 4 days and keep your eyes tuned on communication, collectivity, and things like the internet and social media. It should be very interesting few days. And then boom, we're off and running, and we're into on the 20th, the final degrees of the sun here. But by that time, the moon will be in Aries. And then we've got sun in Aries, and we're not going to have the Aries new moon for a while. Let's see. So we're not going to have a new moon in Aries until the sun is in Aries at 24 degrees. And we're going to have the full moon in Libra, which will be, Easter Sunday. And that's another day to circle off in your calendar with that Mars-Saturn conjunction. Easter Sunday. Yeah, Mars-Saturn. And then we go into that Mars-Pluto conjunction. And that's going to be on, let's see, the 26th. 26th. Now remember, last year, did we have, it's been 2 years since we had Mars in this position. 2 years ago. Well, something happened during that time. I remember talking to Regina about this day. Something did happen on that Mars-Pluto conjunction. Anyway, here we are 2 years later, and we're in the midst of a heavy-duty debate on guns and freedoms and rights, and coming off of a major, will be a major March, and we have that Mars-Pluto conjunction. We're in it. I think we're in the cyclotron now. I think we are in the barrel, as they say. But anyway, tomorrow you're going to get up and there's going to be a Capricorn moon. And it's coming right off of the conjunction with Pluto. And when you get up tomorrow, you're going to be dealing with the realities of work, the realities of duty. And it's not the warmest moon, that Capricorn moon now, is it? Probably don't want to get out of bed tomorrow. By the way, how's the weather out there? It's weird here. We were at 89 degrees yesterday, and today we're like in the low to mid 50s. And of course, they chemtrailed the shit out of the sky yesterday. All right, let me check in with everybody. See what everybody's up to. What do we got going here? Let's see. They want violence, so probably, but yeah, that's what I think, Joe. I think they'll bust in some pro-gun instigators too. I totally agree with that. That's what they did in Charlotte. Both the right and the left were hardcore. Right and left were bust in. Heather Gianna says my Chiron is a 29 Pisces. When is returning to that, Heather? It's real soon. Goes 29 Pisces the end of the month. So congratulations, you're going through your Chiron return. You must be 50, right? 50, 51. Chiron return is a major point in life. Huge. Hi, Marlene. Huge point in life. Life gets really good after the Chiron return. Can I just tell you that? Once I went through my Chiron return, my shit got straight. It did. Totally did. You want to know how I spent my Chiron return? Does anybody want to know? I have Chiron. Here, let's play a guessing game. I have Chiron in Aquarius in the third house. Chiron in Aquarius in the third house. Anybody guess where I spent my Chiron return? I'll tell you. And I've told this story before, and I'm not ashamed of it. I spent my Chiron return locked up for 3 days under observation. No, I wasn't on the internet. No, I was 5150'd. I was 5150'd. And it's true. I was locked up for 3 days. And let me tell you something. I'm not ashamed to talk about this. It was one of the most powerful experiences of my life. It was completely and utterly shamanic. I saw the mental health system from the inside out. I saw in many ways how people who become mental health professionals because they wanted to help people had their worlds turned upside down because of regulations. I saw them handcuffed. I saw people's spirits broken. And you know what else I did? I integrated my madness with Chiron and Aquarius in the third house. It was one of the most liberating experiences of my life. And when you go through your Chiron return, no, that's not going to happen to you. And even if it did, it wouldn't be so bad. No. Where you have Chiron and Pisces, it could be worse for you. I'm sorry. No, I don't mind. I've talked about it before. This is not the first time I've talked about it. But it was really great because from that point forward, it's like once you go through something like that, you're like, fuck, what can get to me, And by the time, I'll tell you a really funny story, okay? So it was my last day. It was my last day there. And the way this thing works is you go in, and every step of the way, I had people telling me, what are you doing here? Ask me, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? A lot of times I think when they get people in there, they're, really total basket cases. And I wasn't a basket case. It was a call that a doctor made. And I had a sub for a couple of days, and I was there for a physical, and she said, you're going. So anyway, most of the people that were there, the people that processed me kept asking me why I was there. Why are you here? Why are you here? You don't seem like somebody who'd be here. I'm like, okay, well, I'm trying to figure this thing out too myself. And I was getting ready to be released the next day. And, I thought so I had this nurse who was assigned to me. And I get up out of my little bed and looking out into, this thing is totally like right out of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Everything from the fluorescent lights to the hard linoleum floors. It was right out of Hollywood, textbook version of what you think it would be. So she asked me, said, Robert, how do you feel today? Well, at that point, my ex was coming, and my ex and I were not on great terms. So we weren't exes at that time, but we weren't on great terms. And I thought, this is what, when they ask you something, like, how are you doing? Then probably the best thing to do would be honest, right? No, there's no big chiefs around. But I'll tell you what, though. There was a guy in there walking around with a David Icke book, okay? There's a kid walking around with one of David Icke's books. I swear to God. Beyond Astrology. Hi, Heather. What's going on? There's Heather. It's true. He's in there. He's in there with a David Icke book. Anyway, so I said to this nurse, I said, well, look, I feel a little anxious today. And I was being honest, right? I thought, oh, here I am. I'm honest. I know what I'm feeling. I know what I'm feeling. I'm honest. And she took that to me that, wow, he's anxious. We should keep him around for a couple more days. So my honesty and my being in touch with the fact that my ex-wife, at that time, my wife who was coming to talk to my shrink was there, and we weren't getting along. Of course I was anxious. Of course. So my honesty got me a couple more days. Isn't that great? So by the time I left, here's the part of the story that I like. Here's the part of the story. So the way it works is you get processed and you're like in the bowels of this place. And they kept telling me, look, just get to the next level. Just get to the next level and they process you out of here. No shock therapy, thank God. So I get to the next level and it's all light and sunny and hardwood floors. It's beautiful up there. Anyway, I get up there and it's there's this woman. She's teaching this little class. And the class she's teaching is about neuropeptides, neurotransmitters. And she's talking about how our thoughts control our feelings. It's like right out of, what the bleep do we know? And I know exactly what she's talking about. So as she's teaching her little class, I start talking to her and I start, reeling the information back to her. And there's this guy there. And he said he's observing the whole thing. And he hears me talk to this woman who's teaching his class. And he cranes his head and he goes, oh my, that's quite lucid. Anyway, by the time she got to the end of this thing, I said, well, listen, if we control our thoughts, if we control our emotions by our thoughts, and we have this ability to have this neuropeptide cocktail work in our favor, then why do we need these drugs? Oh, because it helps you get there faster and stay there longer. It's like, please. Anyway, I got out and it was one of the most empowering experiences of my life. So the long story is that once you make peace with Chiron, and Chiron is a dance between Uranus, which is chaos, and disorder, and revolution, and creativity, and the devil, and Saturn, which is conformity and discipline and structure and doing the right thing, and the arc weld of shame between the two of them. Once you make peace with Chiron, whether it's even before your Chiron return, which is possible, by the way, you don't have to wait till you're 50 to figure out your Chiron and get into it. But once you go through that, then guess what you have? You have psychic integration. And then you can actually teach and heal from that point of Chiron in your chart, whatever it is. Okay, just remember that. So the Chiron return is, if you haven't gotten there by the Chiron return, and you get there, life after 50 is really good. Okay, really good. So keep that in mind. What does Marlene have to say about this? She said, my Chiron return was the year I lived away from home, working in central office, a large government bureaucracy. I had a very vivid dream of hell, which is still powerful enough to quiet the room when told. Wow. Okay. Anytime you live in a central, was that Chiron in Capricorn, Marlene? You have Chiron in Capricorn? Yeah, they let me out. You have to play the game. Like when you're in that situation, you have to play the game. You have to tell them, Aquarius, you have to tell them what they theoretically want to hear. And that's it. That's it. And you get to go out. But it was great. Jennifer Fitzgerald says, yep, we document everything. And I do mean everything the patient says in psych, basically just a case of CYA. So no district. See, I wasn't, I guess, yeah. But I was being honest, right? So much for being honest with your emotions. Yeah. Oh, I'm feeling great today. I'm feeling great. Oh, just chipper and fine. Look where I've woken up into. Yeah, this is great. Yeah, can I have some more of those pills and a little bit of coffee? Oh, I don't care if it's decaf. Just give it to me. All right, what else do we have here? Let's see. Non-Connect says, my daughter's moon is 21 Cap. Close friend died and another moved away. There you go. Let's see. Totally remember the sponge capsules. What else do we have? Let's see. I'm going to go back a little bit. Okay, let's go down a little bit more. So Marlene has Chiron and Aquarius. Chiron and Aquarius. Oh, you know, we're a bunch of nomads from Atlantis. Chiron and Pisces, the heretics, the religious heretics. Let's talk about cyclical astrology. Okay, cyclical astrology. What do I mean by that? Okay, so I think it's really important to understand like where you are on the chart seasonally. Okay, so I'll use my chart, excuse me, as an example. So my ascendant is at 28 Scorpio. That puts Pisces at the bottom of my chart. So in astrology, that's called the nadir, nadir, and then the 10th house would be called the zenith of the chart. So when planets are going through the bottom of my chart, which is what's happening right now, going through the 4th house and 3rd house and the 5th house, you know, what am I going through? What's the best sort of course of action for me? And this could be anybody who has this cycle now, or we can flip it around a little bit, play with it. Is this a great time for me to be in the world? Well, I have to be in the world because, you know, this is what I do. But really, the energy is taking me into the bottom of the chart. It's a good time for me to deal with my household, which I'm doing. I'm moving. It's a good time for me to deal with theoretically things like, you know, my emotional content, emotional influences, to some degree, family. If it's in the 5th house, it's important to deal with things that, you know, I like, care about, love, to some extent, children, going through the 3rd house, the world around me. So this is where the locus of activity is for me right now. So when I talk about sort of the cyclical action or cyclical movement of astrology, it's important to know where your planets are. It's important to know what's going on in your chart, because what you really want to do is you want to take advantage of basically a 6-month period. And that 6-month period takes place when the sun goes above the horizon, and along with it, you know, Mercury and Venus, and then they move to the upper part of the chart. And that journey takes 6 months. And that is a cycle of productivity from the 7th house to basically from the 6th house to the 12th house. Okay, 6th house, 12th house. But really, when all those planets begin to move up above the horizon, because when everything goes into the 12th house, what happens? It's a time of reflection, a time of dealing with, you know, the last 6 months, and then there's some level of rebirth onto the ascendant. So what you want to do in terms of your cycles is you want to kind of plan for, you know, that activity where planets are moving, you know, up from the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th houses. That's the most productive time for you as an individual. And then when they begin to descend, then your interests, your energy, your proclivities become different. They're not moving in the same hemisphere of the chart. Okay. Now we can break that down into quadrants too. So if we go to the 1st house, 2nd house, and 3rd house, we're dealing with really immediate issues of self. Okay. You could be working on those things: who you are, your identity, your physical body, your resources, your money, how you communicate things. Boom. Right. If we want to, we could go like 6, 7, 8 to some degree, right? Dealing with your health, your relationships, and then your energy and your sexuality, right? And resources. So we can actually cordon the chart off as well. So it's important for you to understand where the energy is at a certain point in time and in a given part of the year. Because I always feel really great when, we start to hit like June, July, and the energy starting to move upwards in my chart and getting to that peak in August, in September, and October. And we all have that. We all have that inside of our charts. So I just wanted to talk to you about this because it's a really basic and fundamental premise of astrology. But if you miss it, let's say, for instance, and this has happened to me before in March, if I'm trying to make a big push in terms of like the world, I'm going to miss opportunities to deal with what's going on with my fourth house. And likewise, if I'm up in the upper part of my chart, the sun is going through Virgo and Libra, then I'm going to, and if I'm dealing with stuff below and I'm having to deal with moving, so this is a good time for me to move. It's a good time because I'm dealing with my fourth house. So I think it takes it just takes a little bit of notice to understand, because when you do this, what happens is you become aware of your rhythms and cycles and where you are on the chart. Okay. It's really important. And I think one of the biggest transits is that 12th house transit. When the sun is going through the 12th house, that's just a really good time to shut it down and be as quiet and private as possible. And when that happens for me in Scorpio, man, I try to be as low key as I can. Anyway, I just wanted to bring this up so that you guys understand and can take advantage. It's pretty basic stuff, and I know a lot of you already know this, but I thought it would be just a good reminder, especially as we're coming up on the equinox, spring equinox, which is a whole other energy push. Wherever it is in your chart, this is where you're going to get a significant boost of energy. This is where you get reborn. So just have to, where is that sun going to break in your chart? That's where there's a real burst of energy, and find out where that is. Where's the sun breaking in your chart? 6th house, 7th house, 8th house, 10th house. Because when it does, then you have a real opportunity to make a nice little push, or have some energy, wind at your sails, and you can get again, what's going to happen? Well, 6 months later, you're going to have the outcome of whatever you initiate during the spring equinox. So whatever you put into motion on the spring equinox, it comes to fruition on the autumnal equinox. It's an interesting, again, we're talking about cycles in time, astrological cycles and astrological time. So whatever it is you choose to do on this upcoming equinox, it has a 6-month process. It has a 6-month fruition in your chart. And you could see the fruits of it when we come around to September 22nd, September 23rd. So maybe it would be interesting to keep a journal and see what you do right around that time. I personally highly recommend starting creative projects on the spring equinox. And it doesn't matter where it is in your chart, but if you align it in a certain way, it can have greater impact. Like what happens if the spring equinox is taking place in your 6th house? Well, you would align it towards health, and you could get a real incredible health push, and you would have it every year if you wanted to. Anyway, just cycles, astrology, and time. All right, you guys want to go into some celebrity charts? So at the beginning of tonight's little broadcast here, I said get 4 charts, and they're all within 1 day apart from each other. Okay, so the charts were for March 11th, Johnny Knoxville and Nina Hartley, and March 12th, Ron Jeremy and Jack Kerouac. Okay, So I'm just going to jump into them. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to look at Ron Jeremy's chart, which is interesting, to say the least, okay? So Ron Jeremy, as many of you know or may not know, is one of the most famous porn stars of the 20th century. And I don't normally do porn charts, but I thought it would be interesting to look at his chart and say, can we find like a marker in his chart that has like something to do with porn? Can we find a porn actor inside of an astrological chart? Well, let's try. Let's see what we can find. So I looked at his ascendant, and he's Aquarius rising. Okay, so he's going to be unusual and different. Okay, he is. He has Moon in Aquarius, and then he has the true node in Aquarius. So with the Moon in Aquarius is detached in a lot of ways. I like Moon in Aquarius. It's very detached. I had a very interesting lover with Moon in Aquarius, which I don't want to get into because I'm a gentleman. But let's just say there is a degree of watching involved. Okay, a degree of watching, because that's what the Moon in Aquarius likes to do. It is a voyeuristic moon. The Moon in Aquarius, it likes to observe. It likes to go up, way up here, and look down. And people that have Moon in Aquarius have, I would say, eccentric emotional expression. Okay, it's not run of the mill. This is, it's not run of the mill. So you would think that maybe somebody with Moon in Aquarius would not get attached to people. Am I right? Would not get attached to people. Makes sense to me. If you're going to be somebody in porn, maybe not being emotionally attached would actually be maybe a good thing. True node in Aquarius, hey, I'm going to do my thing, I'm going to go my way. Now, what's really interesting about Ron Jeremy is, I don't know if you know much about him, but he always thought that he could actually be a real actor. And I think he's had a few like cameo roles in movies. But you can see in his chart, he's got that Neptune-Saturn conjunction. And Neptune is film, and he's got that Saturn conjunction to this. So like he's trying hard. He's trying hard. I better watch my verbiage here with Ron Jeremy. But maybe one of these days he'll be an actor. Who knows, with a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. But clearly the Mars and the Venus opposition may not make it necessarily all that easy. Well, why is that? Well, because he's got that Mars-Venus conjunction, Mars in Aries, Venus in Aries, very quick, right? Very quick. Could it be to some degree superficial, topical? Maybe, possibly, yes. What's it doing? Well, Mars and Venus are in trine with what? Pluto. Oh, you got a Mars-Venus conjunction, trine Pluto, and he happens to be in porn. Well, that makes some sense. And there's Pluto over there in the 7th house in Aries. So he's performing, right? Pluto in Aries, performing in relationship. And he's got that Mars, Venus trine to Pluto. Interesting stuff, right? Now here we go. Neptune, Saturn sextile Pluto. And we've got, of course, Neptune is film. We have Saturn. Where is that? That's in Libra. Then you have the sextile to Pluto. So maybe there's a little bit of energy going back and forth between Pluto and Saturn. But to me, really, this chart really boils down to that Venus-Mars conjunction and the trine to Pluto. It's easy, right? This is easy. He can do this. He can have, channel that Mars sexual energy, Pluto trine to Pluto, and guess what? He's detached. He's got this Moon square to Mars, Moon square to Venus. He's detached. He's utterly detached. But here's what I think. Oh, by the way, Uranus in the 6th house, unusual profession, right? And where's his Uranus? Uranus is at 14. So he's going to have a Saturn-Uranus opposition coming up. That's that's interesting. A lot of the baby boomers have the Saturn-Uranus opposition coming up. Has to do with retirement. Anyway, he's got the Sun in Pisces, But in terms of water, he's got sun, he's got a Scorpio midheaven, sex on the midheaven, and he has Uranus in Pisces, unusual occupation in the sixth house. But other than that, he doesn't have any water. I mean, the guy's all, he's all fire and air, and hardly any earth. He's got Jupiter in Taurus. It's the body. Here's what I think. Look where his sun is. His sun, which is at 21 Pisces. He's got this yod, right? He's got the sextile between Neptune, Pluto, Saturn, Pluto, and it comes down into that yod with this sun. I think this is a guy who is ultimately spiritually disenfranchised. That's what I think. I think at the end of his day, and he's going to have Neptune coming up on his sun in what, about 4 years, 3.5, I think 3 years. Neptune's so slow. That he's going to have some kind of realization about his life that I think is going to be, how do I say this? I think he's going to go through a spiritual crisis. That's my sense. You may have already gone through one with Chiron conjuncting the sun. I don't know. I don't follow Ron Jeremy a lot. I don't know what's going on in his life. But to me, it's that in conjunct. And I think that there's some degree of significant dissatisfaction with that yod in his charts. I think there's because he wanted to be a serious actor. That's the sun in conjunct Neptune and Saturn. He wanted to be taken seriously. And then I think there's a trade-off here with the in conjunct with Pluto and the sun in conjunct. Anyway, I just wanted to see if we could get a handle on the chart of a porn star. So his Uranus is where? So he's already had the Pluto-Uranus opposition. That's interesting. And he's got Saturn going through his 12th house. So this is the 30-year review for Ron Jeremy. Very interesting. Anyway, okay, so I was looking, and he's born on March 12th. So I was looking on March 11th, and March 11th happens to be the birthday of Nina Hartley, who's another porn star. So I thought, well, if we could find some markers in Ron Jeremy's chart, what about in Nina Hartley's chart? Can we find something similar? Well, it's interesting. It's not exactly the same, but there are some other aspects here that are fascinating. First of all, what did Ron Jeremy have in his chart? He had the Venus-Pluto trine. She's got the Venus-Pluto trine as well. She's born in 1959, March 11th, 1959. And Ron Jeremy was born on March 12th in 1953. So they're 6 years apart. But still, the Venus-Pluto trine is there. Now, with Nina Hartley, she doesn't have Pluto in the 7th house. She has Mars. Pluto, of course, Mars, the original ruler of Scorpio. So there's an interesting connection between Mars and Pluto. So here she has Mars in the 7th house in Gemini. Okay, in Gemini, which means, multiplicity. There's, there are a number of things happening in Mars, Gemini, and restlessness. And so in Jeremy's chart, he's got the Venus-Mars conjunction. Nina Hartley has the Venus-Mars sextile. So we see a connection again between Venus-Mars in the two charts. And she has Venus-Moon conjunction. And again, what do we see here in her chart? To some degree, a dearth of water. She has a Scorpio ascendant. There's some water. Pisces sun, there's some water. And Jeremy had Uranus in Cancer. Well, she has Neptune in Scorpio. Now, it's a little more well aspected than Jeremy's Uranus. She's got the sextile to Saturn in the chart. He has the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in his chart. Interesting, right? But here, what does she have? She's got Pluto on the midheaven. Pluto on the midheaven. And he has Scorpio on the midheaven. So, Pluto on the midheaven can be a number of different things. It can be very transformational. but it's also the ruler of Scorpio in the zodiac. So it's interesting. True node in the 11th house, and 11th house is Aquarius's house, and Ron Jeremy has true node in Aquarius in the first house. So Nina Hartley has kind of a group consciousness. She's got a group consciousness. And I'm going to say this about Nina Hartley. I think this is a woman that's enjoyed her work. Mercury, Venus, Moon, and Pisces, Venus, Moon, Trine, and Pluto. I think she's enjoyed. Apparently, she's quite bright. Apparently, she has a high intellect. She's got Mercury, Uranus, Trine. I'd buy that. And she also has a Mercury, Mars sextile with Mars and Gemini. I think she is bright. But again, there's not a ton of water in either chart. Hers is submerged with Neptune in the 12th house. I think she's probably a little better off, quote unquote, spiritually than Ron Jeremy with Neptune in the 12th house. But I thought to myself, wow, this is kind of interesting. And Venus, Uranus, Trine, unusual relationships, unusual connections. I'm sorry, Venus, Uranus sextile. And it's that Venus-Pluto trine out of sign. Fascinating. So yeah, I think there are connections here. Is everybody that has a chart like this going to turn out to be a porn star? I don't think so. But we have Pluto in the 7th, Mars in the 7th. Venus-Pluto trine, Venus-Uranus sextile. And we have true node in the 11th house in Libra. Very, sort of social, democratic, not attaching to anybody really. And then true node in Aquarius in the first house. She has Saturn in Capricorn. She's going through her Saturn return. Apparently she made a lot of money, and I think she's out of porn now. I don't know. I don't follow these things that much, to be honest. I just thought it was interesting that we had two porn stars basically born in March on the 11th. And I'll bet you they've had sex with each other too, probably numerous times. Sun-Sun conjunction. Okay, so the other chart that I wanted to look at was Johnny Knoxville. Johnny Knoxville's the guy that does Jackass, and he abuses himself, right? And I thought, okay, can we find out where this is in his chart? Well, he's got true node in Aquarius as well, just like Ron Jeremy does. So there's a depersonalization with the true node in Aquarius in the first house. And there is some degree in connection to media, obviously, there. But I was really interested in Mars in his chart. So what's going on with Mars and Johnny Knoxville's chart? So he has it at 29 degrees Sagittarius. And, Sagittarius it overdoes everything, right? He has Jupiter in Sagittarius. He's got a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. And he's got Scorpio in the midheaven as well. But I thought, well, let's see what his Mars is doing. Well, his Mars is doing plenty. He's got Mars square Sun, Mars square Mercury, Mars square Pluto. He's got a Sun-Pluto opposition. So this is a guy who has he has no problem using that Mars, probably for some level of self-affliction. Because if you've ever seen Jackass, he does a huge amount of damage to himself. So he's got plenty of Mars action to do that. Very interesting. And then he got involved with the whole Jackass crew, and that was this guy Bam Margera and a lot, the Wee Man or whatever his name is. There are a lot of people associated with Johnny Knoxville and Jackass. And who else is it? Pastrana. I think Travis Pastrana was kind of part of their thing. Anyway, it's the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction with the ingress into the 11th house, which is groups, right? And a Sagittarian kind of group, like a team, but they're not your average team. Who's the other one? Steve-O. Steve-O's in here too. Well, he's not in here. I believe Steve-O's a Gemini, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. I think he's a Gemini, which would put his son in Johnny Knoxville's 5th house. Anyway, I thought, well, can we find something in here that would sort of typify or at least give us some understanding as to why somebody would want to, shoot themselves with things like tasers and, maybe, and I think it might be that true node in Aquarius in the first house, but I think it's that Mars and in Sagittarius willing to, do just about anything at that 29th degree. It's like, no, one more stunt, one more wild thing, one more bit of craziness. Okay, so here's what I thought was interesting. I almost didn't bring this up, but and by the way, Johnny Knoxville, I think really came to. I think he really came of age when Pluto was in was Pluto Sag, little Pluto and Sag action. I think that was what up until 2009. So we had Pluto going through his 11th house. Pluto was going through his 11th house up through 2000. And so I think that's when a lot of the Jackass stuff was happening. And I remember seeing the Jackass movie in like 2004, 2000, I think it was 2003 when I saw that Jackass movie. And that's when Pluto was definitely in his 11th house. And now it's in his 12th house. You don't see Johnny Knoxville as much anymore, do we? All right, so this was interesting, okay, because we saw these two porn stars that were born day apart, different years. So I kept looking at Jack Kerouac's chart. It's like, do I want to talk about Jack Kerouac? Can I, find why Jack Kerouac is on the road? So I was looking up some background information on Johnny Knoxville. And I thought that this was really interesting. Really interesting. And let me see if I can find this. So he was born Philip John Clapp. That's Johnny Knoxville's real name. He was born in Knoxville, Tennessee. His father, Philip Clapp Sr., is a tire car salesman, and his mother, Lemoyne Clapp, taught Sunday school. So Johnny Knoxville's mother is a Sunday school teacher. Knoxville credits a copy of Jack Kerouac's On the Road given to him by his cousin, singer-songwriter Roger Allen Wade, with giving him the acting bug. Okay, well, I thought that this was interesting because Jack Kerouac is born on March 12th. And Jack Kerouac's sun is 1 degree off of Johnny Knoxville's sun. So I think that this is actually interesting because, yeah, he picked up the book, and On the Road is obviously kind of a groundbreaking book in American literature for a number of different reasons. But he also is just 1 degree off of his sun. Wow. It's pretty fascinating. And guess what? Johnny Knoxville and Jack Kerouac have Mars in what sign? Sagittarius. They both have Mars in Sagittarius. So from a masculine perspective, which is Mars, and they're born, quite a few years apart. Jack Kerouac was born in 1922. Johnny Knoxville was born in 1971. And Johnny Knoxville's Jupiter, which is at 6 degrees Sagittarius, is conjunct Jack Kerouac's Mars at 10 degrees in Sagittarius. And Johnny Knoxville's Neptune, which is at 3 degrees Sagittarius, is in a wide conjunction with Kerouac's Mars. So we have romanticism about the Kerouac figure connected through Mars and Sagittarius. Like, wow, this is really interesting. So he credits Jack Kerouac with kind of changing his life. And Jack Kerouac is 1 degree off of his sun. They both have Mars in Sagittarius. And Johnny Knoxville's Sun and Jupiter conjunct Jack Kerouac's Mars. Like, wow, this is really interesting. This is a trip. So Knoxville and Kerouac both have Moon in Virgo. How about that? And Jack Kerouac's moon is at 13 degrees, and Johnny Knoxville's moon is at 12 degrees. Function of the year, function of the time. Still there it is, nonetheless. Sun-Sun conjunction, Moon-Moon conjunction. And guess what? They're both born on full moons. There we go. I think Johnny Knoxville has done a couple of full moon shots in his day, hasn't he? Both born on full moons. Now, with Kerouac, his moon is conjunct his ascendant. Now, when I first looked at Kerouac's chart, I was like, well, where do we see the on the road? Where's the on the road? Where's like the restless? Well, I think it's Mars in the 4th house in Sagittarius. He had to get out, right? That's a restless Mars, to see the world in a big way, maybe even forced out by, what happened in his home. Mars in the 4th house is usually violence. By and large, it's violence. A lot of times when I read a chart for a person, I see Mars in the 4th house. You can almost rest assured that there's been some anger in the home, and a lot of times violence. Johnny Knoxville, Saturn down in the 4th house. That might be kind of a dominating father, right? Although he certainly didn't follow in Philip Clapp Sr.'s footsteps and become a tire salesman. So yeah, I think Mars in the 4th house is the trigger for being on the road. Because unlike Johnny Knoxville, Jack Kerouac has Gemini on the midheaven, and that's travel. That's travel. That's travel by car. That's travel by bus. It's the nature of Gemini. It's traveling. It is on the road with Gemini in the midheaven. And Mars is the propellant. Mars is the fuel at the bottom of the chart in the nadir for Gemini in the midheaven. Like, okay, I can see this. I can see the energy in the chart. I can see the on the road. I can see the traveling across sort of the highways and the byways of America with Neil Cassidy, who, by the way, you can see Neil Cassidy right here. Jupiter, Sun, Saturn, all in Libra, right? Neil Cassidy, Jack Kerouac's road buddy, and probably lovers, by the way. I think they're probably lovers. They're probably. So yeah, so there's not just Jack Kerouac. There's Jack Kerouac and Neil Cassidy. With Johnny Knoxville, it's Johnny Knoxville and the Jackass crew. And that's the difference between True Node in Aquarius and True Node in Libra. Now, what's really interesting about Jack Kerouac is that Jack Kerouac, a lot of people don't know this, but I think he was a trained, he was either a trained stenographer or court reporter. I think he was trained, because Kerouac was one of these guys that really pioneered stream of consciousness writing. And the way that he did that is he had one of those machines that the court reporters use. And back in the day, you'd have to, have a typewriter and type, and then rip out a piece of paper and stop, and then put another piece of paper in. But he didn't do that. He typed his novels on the court reporter. What are they called? Stenographers? Stenograph? I think that's what it is. And so he could load up a big spool of paper and just keep going. And that led to Kerouac's stream of consciousness, which is very Piscean, right, in a lot of ways. So he has Mercury in Aquarius, so it's kind of a different way of communicating, and it's in the 6th house, but in his Mercury trines Jupiter, and so we have this expansive potential for communication with Mercury. What's really interesting with Kerouac is he was a complete and utter raging alcoholic. But you don't see any real major affliction with Neptune in the chart, which I find fascinating. You do see the affliction with Pluto, though. Saturn-Pluto square. That's a heavy duty. That's a heavy duty aspect of the father. Saturn-Pluto square. And then again, more restlessness. Mars square Uranus. Unconventional relationships. And then that 29th degree with Venus in Pisces. Interesting. Squaring Pluto, tragic relationships. Well, we know Jack Kerouac. I think Jack Kerouac also might have been there are people who have posited that Kerouac might have been an agent of some sort too. I haven't fully fleshed that out yet. I've got other things cooking. Anyway, I thought that this story about Knoxville and Kerouac was interesting, and clearly there are some astrological markers that connect the two in more than just him getting into on the road and heading west and going to be an actor. All right, why don't I check in with you guys in the old chat room there? Let's see what we got. Okay, people are leaving. Gotta go. I am. You are a Ood astrology. Good. Okay. All right. Hey, people are starting to want to go to bed now. I think people are wanting to hang out. I think go to bed, get some sleep. Why don't we do that? Well, thank you for tuning in, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for joining the party, Heather. Oh, Marlene does have Capricorn, Chiron and Capricorn. That's right. Anyway, hey, thanks for tuning in. If you're interested in getting into the Chiron and Aries webinar, go to Astrological, check it out. If not, I'm still doing readings, although I've spaced them out until after this week when I get settled. And it's a good time to get a reading, especially at the beginning of the year. So thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Have a great week. And God bless you all. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. And I will do a 15 minutes tomorrow. It'll be my last 15 minutes, probably here in Austin. And then headed west. Have a great night.